The woman stood at the edge of the road like she'd been waiting for him all along. Caleb Mercer saw her from a quarter-mile out, a dark silhouette against the fading light, one hand gripping a worn carpetbag, the other shading her eyes from the dust his wagon kicked up. He slowed the horses, his jaw tightening. Out here 40 miles from the nearest town, people didn't just appear, not unless something had gone very wrong. He pulled the wagon to a stop a few feet from her and studied her face, mid-30s maybe, sun-weathered but handsome, with sharp cheekbones and eyes the color of creek stone. Her dress was plain, patched at the elbows, and her boots were caked in red dirt. She looked tired, not the kind of tired that came from a long day's work, but the kind that settled into bones and refused to leave. "You lost?" Caleb asked, his voice rougher than he intended. She shook her head. "No, sir, just waiting." "For what?" "A ride if you're heading toward Silver Creek." He had been riding back from town with supplies, flour, coffee, nails, the things that kept a ranch limping along when there was no one left to help run it. He should have said no, should have tipped his hat and kept moving. Strangers were trouble, especially out here where the law was 3 days' ride away and grudges lasted generations. But something about the way she stood there, still, patient, like she'd learned how to wait without hope, made him pause. "Get in," he said. She climbed up beside him without a word, settling the carpetbag between her feet. Caleb clicked his tongue, and the horses started forward again, their hooves crunching over gravel and dry grass. They rode in silence for a long stretch. The sun bled into the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rust and amber. Caleb kept his eyes on the road, but he could feel her watching him, careful, cautious, like she was trying to place him in some memory she couldn't quite reach. Finally she spoke. "You're Caleb Mercer." His hands tightened on the reins. He turned to look at her, and for the first time he saw it, the recognition in her eyes, the weight of something unspoken pressing down between them. "How do you know my name?" She hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a small photograph, its edges bent and faded. She handed it to him. Caleb stared at the image. 2 men stood side by side in front of a barn, both young, both smiling. He recognized himself immediately, 20 years younger, before the lines had settled into his face, before the loneliness had carved him hollow, and beside him, arms slung over his shoulder, was his brother, Thomas. Caleb's breath caught. He looked at the woman, his mind racing, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Who are you?" he whispered. She met his gaze, steady and unflinching. "My name is Anna," she said quietly. "I was married to your brother." The photograph slipped from Caleb's fingers and landed in the dust. Net ##. Caleb didn't speak for the rest of the ride. His mind spun in circles, trying to make sense of what she'd said, trying to reconcile the ghost of his brother with the woman sitting beside him. Thomas had been dead for 8 years, killed in a saloon shootout in El Paso, or so the letter had said. Caleb had never gone to claim the body, had never asked questions. He'd simply buried the news the way he buried everything else, deep, where it couldn't hurt him. And now this woman, Anna, sat beside him, carrying a piece of his brother he'd never known existed. By the time they reached the ranch, the sky had gone black, pricked with stars that felt too far away to matter. Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house, a low weathered structure with a sagging porch and a chimney that hadn't seen smoke in days. He climbed down without a word and began unloading supplies. Anna stepped down carefully, clutching her bag, and stood in the yard, looking around like she was searching for something she'd lost. "You can stay the night," Caleb said, finally, his voice flat. "There's a room in the back. Door sticks but it locks." "Thank you." He nodded and carried the flour inside. She followed him in, her footsteps soft on the wooden floor. The house was sparse, bare walls, a single table, a chair by the fire. It looked like what it was, a place where a man survived, but didn't live. Caleb set the flour down and turned to face her. "Why are you here?" Anna set her bag on the table and met his eyes. "Because I didn't know where else to go. Thomas is dead." "I know." Then what do you want from me? She flinched but didn't look away. Nothing. I needed to see the place he talked about. The ranch. He used to tell me stories before. Her voice faltered. Before everything went wrong. Caleb's jaw clenched. He never mentioned you. Not once. He wouldn't have. She pulled out the chair and sat down slowly, her hands folded in her lap. We met in El Paso. He was working as a ranch hand, and I was trying to leave a bad situation. We got married quick, too quick maybe, but he was kind to me. He made me feel safe. Safe. The word came out bitter. Thomas didn't know the meaning of the word. He did with me. Caleb turned away, gripping the edge of the table. His knuckles went white. He left this place because he couldn't face what he'd done. He stole from our father, gambled away money we didn't have, and when the old man died, Thomas ran, didn't even come back for the funeral. Anna's voice was quiet. He told me, all of it. Then you know what kind of man he was. I know what kind of man he became. She stood, her eyes steady, and I know he regretted it, every day. Caleb wanted to believe her, wanted to believe his brother had found some kind of redemption before the end, but belief was a luxury he'd stopped affording himself years ago. You can stay, he said again, softer this time, but come morning you'll need to move on. Anna nodded, understood, but as she turned toward the back room, Caleb felt something crack inside him, something he'd been holding together with silence and distance for far too long, and he didn't know if he wanted it to break, or if he was afraid it already had. Caleb. Anna stayed, not just one night, but 3, then a week. Caleb didn't ask her to leave again, and she didn't offer. She made herself useful, mending fences, cooking meals, tending the small vegetable garden that had gone to seed. She worked quietly, never asking for anything, never pushing him to talk, and slowly, against his better judgment, Caleb began to let her in. She told him about Thomas, about the man he'd been in those final years, sober, steady, trying to build something honest. She told him about the small house they'd rented, the dreams they'd shared, the way Thomas would sit on the porch at night and talk about coming home, about making things right, and then she told him how it ended. It wasn't a shootout, she said one evening, as they sat by the fire, not the way the letter said. Caleb looked up, his chest tightening. What do you mean? He was trying to stop a fight. 2 men, drunk, pulling guns on each other in the street. Thomas stepped between them. Her voice cracked. He died trying to do the right thing. Caleb's throat burned. He didn't know what to say, didn't know how to hold this new version of his brother alongside the old one. Before he could respond, the sound of hoofbeats echoed across the valley. Caleb stood, his hand moving instinctively to the rifle hanging above the door. Anna rose beside him, her face pale. Who is it? She whispered. I don't know. 3 riders emerged from the darkness, their faces obscured by shadow and dust. They stopped at the edge of the property, and one of them, a tall man with a scar running down his jaw, dismounted slowly. Caleb Mercer. The man called out. That's me. The man stepped closer, his eyes cold. We're looking for a woman. Anna Mercer. Heard she might be here. Caleb's blood went cold. He glanced at Anna, whose face had gone ashen. Who's asking? Caleb said, his voice steady. Name's Dawson, Anna's husband, her real husband. He's got business with her. She ran off with money that didn't belong to her. We're here to take her back. Anna stepped forward, her voice shaking but firm. I was never married to him. He kept me like property. I ran because I had no choice. Dawson smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That ain't how he tells it. Caleb raised the rifle, his finger resting on the trigger. She's not going anywhere. The other 2 riders drew their guns, and the night exploded into tension so thick it felt like the air itself might shatter. Hush, hush, hush. Easy now, Dawson said, raising his hand slowly. No need for bloodshed. We just want the woman. You hand her over, and we ride out. Simple. Nothing simple, Caleb said, his rifle still trained on the man's chest. And she's not going with you. Dawson's jaw tightened. You don't know what you're getting into, Mercer. This ain't your fight, it is now. Anna's hand touched Caleb's arm, light but urgent. Caleb, don't, they'll kill you, they'll try. Dawson took a step forward, his eyes narrowing. She tell you what she did? She stole $300 from a man who gave her everything, took it, and ran like a thief in the night. I took what I earned, Anna shot back, her voice steady now. I cooked, I cleaned, I endured things no woman should endure. That money was mine. That's not how the law sees it. The law, Caleb's voice was sharp. You ride out here in the dark with guns drawn, and you talk to me about the law. Dawson's expression hardened. Last chance, Mercer, hand her over, or we take her. Caleb's finger tightened on the trigger. Then Anna stepped in front of him. Stop, she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. She looked at Dawson, then back at Caleb. I'll go. No, Caleb said immediately. I won't let you die for me. Her eyes were wet, but her voice didn't waver. You've already given me more than I deserved. A place to rest, a chance to breathe. That's enough. It's not enough, Caleb said, his voice raw. Thomas would have wanted. Thomas is gone. She reached up and touched his face, her hand trembling. But you're here, and I won't let them take you too. For a moment the world went still. Then Caleb lowered the rifle. Dawson grinned. Smart man. But before he could move, Caleb spoke again, his voice low and cold. You take her, and I'll follow. I'll find you, and I'll make sure you answer for what you've done. The grin faded. Dawson stared at him for a long moment, then spat into the dirt. You're a fool, Mercer. Maybe, Caleb said, but I'm a fool with nothing left to lose. Dawson glanced at his men, then back at Anna. Finally he shook his head. Keep her. She ain't worth the trouble. He mounted his horse, and the three of them rode off into the dark. Anna collapsed against Caleb, her body shaking with sobs, and Caleb held her, his arms tight around her, as the stars burned overhead. Hush, hush. The days that followed were quiet, but not empty. Anna stayed, and this time, it wasn't out of necessity, it was choice. She and Caleb worked the ranch together, mending what was broken, planting what had gone fallow, building something neither of them had thought possible. She told him more stories about Thomas, about the man he'd become, the kindness he'd shown, the way he'd tried to make up for the past. And Caleb listened, letting those stories fill the spaces where anger and bitterness had lived for so long. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set, Anna spoke softly. Do you think he'd forgive me for moving on? Caleb looked at her, surprised. Forgive you? For what? For being here, with you, for feeling like I belong. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Thomas loved you, and if he loved you, he'd want you to be happy, even if it wasn't with him. She reached for his hand, and he took it. I think he'd forgive both of us, Caleb said. Anna smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks. I hope so. Months turned into years. The ranch grew stronger. The land, once lonely and silent, began to hum with life again. Anna planted flowers by the porch, wild flowers, the kind that grew stubborn and bright, even in harsh soil. Caleb fixed the chimney, and smoke rose every evening, warm and steady. They never spoke of Dawson again, never looked over their shoulders. They simply lived, day by day, building a life from the ruins of what had been lost. And one spring morning, as Caleb stood in the field watching Anna hang laundry on the line, he realized something. He wasn't alone anymore. Years later, when Caleb was old and gray, he would sit on that same porch and remember the day he picked up a stranger on the road. He would remember the photograph, the stories, the night the riders came. He would remember the moment he chose to fight, not for revenge, not for pride, but for something bigger, for family, for love, for the chance to be more than the sum of his regrets. And as the sun set over the valley, painting the sky in shades of gold and fire, he would close his eyes and hear Anna's voice, soft and sure, calling him home. Thomas had left him a gift, in the end, not money, not land, but a second chance, and Caleb had taken it.